Hey everyone, Tactics here, and we've got some more exciting stuff to talk about this week for 9.1's PTR build. Namely, the Season 2 Affix has finally been revealed as Tormented. As well, we also have some buffs for the recently nerfed AMZ. Remember, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to be notified when I post more Warcraft content. And let's start with the small list of class changes we have before diving into the Affix. So, AMZ. We've got some changes here. So they've added a 1.5 times modifier to it. So previously this was just your health modified by whatever your versatility percent was. So if your versatility was, say, 10% for a DPS DK, it would be your health times 1.1. And now all that is just multiplied by another 1.5. And then the cooldown has also been reduced back down to 2 minutes. So what does this really mean for DKs and AMZ? So one, I think blood DKs are now just completely in the realm of the old AMZ. That's what they have. They have the old AMZ, 2-minute CD. I think their shield, they were pretty easily able to get it to 120k on a conservative level, thanks to things like vampiric blood and just them having more versatility than a DPS DK. So you just increase that by 50%. They're at a 180k shield, which means that will effectively mitigate 900,000 raid damage. If I'm doing that right, yeah, 900,000 raid damage, that's basically the old AMZ. The only difference now is obviously that 8-second duration is much lower. I believe it was 12 seconds previously before this nerf, if I remember that correctly. Maybe it was 10 seconds. Can't remember off the top of my head. But basically, you're only worried about now that lower duration, and that absorb amount is basically going to cover every big hit that I can think of currently, especially on the last few bosses. So it will cover that. For DPS DKs, you're now in a much better spot as well. My conservative estimate for something like Unholy or Frost, they don't have a ton of verse. Their HP is expected to go up a bit, obviously, with the stamina scaling. And so I was putting these shields at around 60k before this buff, which means it'll go up to 90k now after this buff, which is obviously still lower than the old blood DK buff. So it's still going to run into the problem of the absorb cap, right? You're going to hit that, but it'll be much better than it was previously with this nerf. It'll still cover 450,000 raid damage, right, which is just over 20k per player, or closer to 25k per player if you end up dropping your tanks from these absorbs. Which I think, especially for using a DPS DK AMZ, I think it'll become the norm to leave your tanks out of the AMZ so that your other players get a higher benefit from the absorbed hit. But yeah, overall, I think that this is much better for DKs. I don't know about this 2-minute reduction. It definitely gives you a bigger reason to bring blood DKs, so that's something they really needed, especially with their low damage. So it's very good for them. And it makes this ability more of a like half your raid kind of cooldown, maybe 3/4 of your raid. So it's more like something you don't want everyone to be in, but it's still a decently sized raid hit. And that's actually a lot of the later bosses in raid I can think of. I think you even before this buff came in, you were definitely going to still see Unholy Death Knights in the Race to World First, I think, and now this just kind of cements their place again. Maybe not 4, maybe 4 though. We'll see how it plays out. The only other notable change I do want to talk about is the Druid Conduit. So this was a Guardian Druid Conduit, but of course pretty much every Druid spec was using it because it was so strong. Basically, when you fall below 40% health, you'll instantly cast Frenzied Regen. Previously, the base CD was 90 seconds. This was moved up by 45 seconds to 135. I believe currently we're around here at the 56.3 seconds. If you're at 226, I believe it is. So that's been just bumped up by, just under 30 seconds. We're expecting to go, 3 ranks up, 2 ranks up. So it'll be in the 75 to 71-ish second range. So it'll be a little bit more than it is right now once you move it up. But this conduit was very strong, not only for Guardians, but like this was contributing heavily to the tankiness of Boomkins, especially in raids. Right, because this would just auto trigger. It would heal you back all the way up to full if you just went below 40% health. 40% is a great threshold for this. It was helping obviously survive raid mechanics. Barkshin was also helping a lot, but it definitely deserved the nerf it got. It's still going to be very strong. I'm not too worried about it. It was very strong already, so definitely needed that. From there, let's talk about what's on everyone's mind, the new seasonal Affix Tormented. So, it's kind of like a little bit of a mix between Awakened, the 8.3 Affix back in BFA if you're familiar, and Prideful. So basically there's 4 lieutenants. There's basically these 4 unique mini-bosses. They're present in every dungeon. Whenever you kill them, they will drop a set of anima powers for you to choose from. 3, just like in Torghast, and these are based on your role. So there's a set for healers, a set for tanks, and a set for DPS. Every single lieutenant has a unique aura on them when you're pulling them, and you can choose to skip these lieutenants, and if you do, their aura will just apply to the final boss. Right, so these lieutenants are not worth percent at all, so you are completely able to skip them. The downside, of course, so they just get that aura to the last boss, which you may or may not want to do, depending. Again, I think a big thing will be how hard they scale with key level. I assume they are not scaling with Tyrannical Fortified, just key level like Prideful did. So we'll have to see how that ends up. I'll doing a bunch of personal testing on this stuff, probably on my stream, probably today and throughout this next week, to see how this affix is looking on the PTR. So if you want to check me out on Twitch at Tactics, shameless plug. But moving on. So basically, here's a Mist Saturnus Scythe example. So they always had the people, the lieutenants spawning in the same spot. So it was, I believe, here, and like down there. Always spawning in the same spot. Always the same lieutenants in the same spot. So they weren't moving from run to run. If you guys remember, Awakened followed this like A-B pattern where they would rotate 2 of the positioning every other week, I believe it was. So there could be something similar to that. We'll have to wait until Tuesday to see if they're rotating positions or if they're rotating anima power pools, because as of right now, their anima powers are static. You are always getting the same anima powers from the same mini boss in the same dungeon. So RNG is gone for now. The anima power pools are also fairly small. So currently, a lot of the RNG worries are not in. So that's very, very good. Very happy. The more consistent this is, the happier I'm going to be. So always good to see that. Now, in terms of the lieutenants themselves, their auras here. One of them is a 50% move speed reduction. One of them is a fire damage, kind of pulsing every 3 seconds. One of them is a 50% reduced healing aura, and one of them is a 50% increased physical damage taken. As I mentioned, they do not give count. They do not have their health reset on a wipe, so that's always nice. I think what we'll see in a decent number of these is you'll pull the lieutenant in with a trash pack nearby it. So if you do end up wiping to that, you're not as punished, as they'll have the same health that you wiped at. And they do have True Sight, though, again, they are positioned in ways where you can probably just walk by without them noticing you. But in case you are trying to shroud right beside one, they will see you, so just keep that in mind. In terms of the lieutenants themselves, there's an Incinerator Arcalath, and he's basically got the very similar to Prideful. He's pulsing fire damage. It doesn't ramp or anything, so it's just consistent fire damage pulsing every 3 seconds. And this is something I'm a little worried about scaling. We'll have to see how this scales. It could be very spooky. He also just puts basically these fire zones on the ground you need to dodge, and then it's just a magic debuff on a player that just increases their fire damage taken, which you'll want to dispel. Next up, we have Oros Coldheart. He is the 50% slow guy. He's also very icy, so it makes sense. Basically, he's got a frontal cone kind of in Frostlance. Just need to avoid that. And then he just debuffs people with a frost dot that spreads to nearby players, so you want to be a little bit spread. Sagadon the Breaker is next, and he's got the physical damage aura, 50% physical damage. And he's also got a big AoE, massive smash. I don't know if it's pictured here. Yeah, it's not. Basically, he's just got a ring, a 16-yard circle around him that knocks back and deals a ton of damage. We've got to run out of that. And then he also will self-enrage, kind of reducing his move speed, but giving him a big physical damage increase. So you probably have to kite that a little bit as the tank. And finally, we've got Executioner Varuth. And this is the guy who's probably going to be the roughest. 50% healing reduction. That's scary. Combined with a tank buster that has a bleed and a high physical damage to a random target and nearby targets also with a bleed. So if you can look at this, obviously Kyrian will be able to remove these bleeds. But also, of course, good old paladins will be able to bop and immune this physical damage. as well as to get rid of the bleed, which may or may not be necessary depending on how this scales in higher key levels, right? So could just be another thing that kind of cements Holy Paladins as the go-to healer. Now, in terms of the anima powers, as I mentioned, they are role dependent, right? And they don't appear to be RNG, at least on a day-to-day basis. They may change week to week. We'll have to find out. But as of right now, they're not changing if you're killing the same bosses in the same dungeons. They're the same. There's basically a big list here. Some where you're basically turning the affixes on the enemies, right? So like bolstering, for example, when you kill enemies, you'll get 4% increased damage done, stacking up to 5 times. There's the volcanic plumage right now. You basically can spawn volcanoes underneath enemies and it'll knock them up if they're CCable. So things like that. There's also a set of basically older legendary effects. Like there's a Pride As effect, the Stone Ward here, 20% of your max health every 30 seconds. There was that restore 6% of your max health every 3 seconds while standing still, which was those the male legendary back in Legion. You eat food faster, much faster. Could be good for healers to regen mana between pulls if they're able to just basically drink a whole water in like 5 seconds. That'll be great for them. Might solve a lot of the mana problems that Prideful is kind of sort of solving, but also just having a Holy Paladin is solving, seeing as they don't use too much mana. And there's also some new ones, like your healing spells have a chance to generate loose mana, which you can collect to restore 10% of your max mana. Right? There's stuff like when enemies strike you in melee combat, you do 7% of your current health and shadow damage to them. That one's very strong right now, but again, I'm not focusing too much on the strength of these powers right now, because that's just a numbers thing, a lot of them, but rather the strength of the effect, as opposed to the actual number balancing of the effect. But yeah, this is very interesting. I'm super excited to test this out on the PTR. As I mentioned, I'll be streaming that over on my Twitch at Tactics, and I'll also be putting out a video, most likely in the next few days, kind of talking about how the testing went with that, my opinions, my thoughts on the different powers, the scaling, all those kinds of things, so be on the lookout for that. But that is it for this week's 9.1 PTR update, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to support the channel, and I will see you all in the next one.